All right, welcome everyone to CNS Connect Webinar Series. My name is Amy Smith and I'm the Director of Certifications for the ANA and the BCNS. And today I am joined by Megan Barnett, who's going to share her expertise on how to sharpen your skills as an investigative nutritionist. If you have any questions, please sure to put them in the chat or the Q&A, and Megan and I will do our best to keep track of those throughout the presentation. Feel free to go ahead and put them in as they come up, so we'll take them as we can or at the end. As a reminder, if you're a CNS, you can earn 1 CEU today for this webinar, which would be in category number 5, which is professional development. And I will put a survey in the chat towards the end of the webinar for you to claim that CEU. So let me tell you a little bit about our speaker today. Megan is a CNS. She's an experienced functional medicine provider, a certified nutrition specialist, research writer, public speaker, and educator with over 10 years in the field of nutrition science and functional medicine. She is the co-owner of Bio Lounge, a functional medicine clinic in Portland, Oregon, co-founder and product developer of Flora Sophie Organic Soluble Fiber Blends, and co-developer of the Bio Lounge Clinical Immersion Program, a 12-week course built to bridge the gap between education and clinical experience for master level nutritionists while providing CNS supervision. In her clinical practice, Megan works with patients across the country, identifying and resolving underlying nutrition, infectious, and inflammatory triggers, leading to the reversal of chronic and systemic symptoms while promoting health and longevity. She combines an extensive health intake alongside comprehensive laboratory testing and in-depth patient education to improve immune function, reduce inflammatory markers, optimize metabolic function, and reverse symptoms and disease risk. Thank you so much for joining us today, Megan, and I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks for having me. Okay, I'm going to figure out how to share my screen and then get started. Okay, so.
Perfect.
Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, great. Well, thank you for the introduction. And I'm excited today to talk to everybody about sharpening skills as an investigative nutritionist. When I think about what I do, and it's, we don't run around saying, come see me, I'm an investigative nutritionist. It's not like a term that's deemed in our industry by any means. But when I think about how I've used my degree and certification and education, it really has developed into becoming an investigative nutritionist. And I think that is common among CNSs because we've gone to that advanced level of really understanding deeply, not just generalized nutrition, but how nutrition affects the body as a whole and the biochemistry behind that. So let me dive in. So Amy already told you all my stuff. I went to Kansas State and got an undergrad in dietetics. And, I had a moment where I thought, did my professor really just say that I should add Jell-O packet flavoring to Carnation Instant Breakfast so my clients and patients don't get bored with the flavor? I think I need to know more. I think I need to learn more. This can't be it, right? And so I did go on to do a master's degree in functional medicine and human nutrition from University of Western States. And, at that time, I don't think I knew what a CNS was. Actually, I know I didn't know what a CNS was. And so it took some time for me to learn about what our industry really was, what we had for available resources and support certifications. I actually sort of had a little meltdown after my graduate program. I had 2 young kids. I finished my graduate program, and my family actually moved to Italy for a year in sort of a panic that I had. It was a blessing in a lot of ways. It was an interesting experience, but I couldn't work clinically. Obviously, I graduated, I had this education, I was excited about the education, and then I found myself in Italy going, why did I do that? Now I can't even work. But it was an experience where because I couldn't work, I started putting myself out there to write blogs and articles for functional medicine doctors. And I ended up spending that year writing articles and writing books as a ghostwriter for physicians back in the States. And throughout that year, I ended up writing 6 books. And this is what really triggered me into this very investigative state, because they would tell me, write a book on this topic. And while I'd done a lot of research in my undergrad and my graduate program, the opportunity to get paid to do a deep dive into subjects around glucose, subjects around Alzheimer's, around autoimmunity was really very cool. So I spent the year doing research and research writing. And when I came back, reconnected with a nurse practitioner that I had met in my master's degree internship. And he happened to have been opening a new clinic, BioLounge. And I said, hey, how about I come work with you as a nutritionist? And so I worked at BioLounge for 4 years before buying in as a partner. So now I'm a co-owner here. And it's been also another blessing because my business partner is very smart and also very willing to coordinate care with me. So we have a team approach here. And so I've now worked clinically for 5 years and had a moment in the middle of the pandemic where I didn't think I had enough going on with my 2 kids and my business, and I have a lot of animals at home as well. So I had a moment of feeling like, oh, I've got extra time, and I developed fluorosophy, and fluorosophy is organic soluble fiber blends. That was because I was learning a lot about soluble fiber and thought, oh, there isn't one that I really like, and so got involved in that, and then in the last couple of years also developed the clinical immersion program here at BioLounge. All of these moments or periods in my life are what led me, and I should actually say motherhood. You know, I have these 2 little test cases at home. They're not little anymore. They're almost 15 and 17 this summer, but I've, tested things on them. I've seen their illnesses. I've seen the way their bodies function or don't function. And then of course, my own body and even my spouse's body, but the curiosity around why we thrive or we don't thrive, and then these many opportunities to really dig into those things have led me to the point that I am now, where my practice is primarily focused on mystery cases, people that don't really know what's going on with them. They haven't been able to find an answer. And so I do a lot of investigative work, and then utilize nutrition, supplementation, lifestyle coordination with other providers to help support them. So in saying that, the question I was thinking about when I was preparing this is, what is an investigative nutritionist? And it is really somebody that is trained, as we all are, to identify the root cause of what symptom presentation we're seeing, not just say, oh, you have the symptom and we're going to help you feel better, but why is it happening in the first place? And then use our toolbox that we have, which, outside of diagnosis and pharmaceuticals and surgery, we have the majority of those tools, right? To help people find a new norm, their new health, and then see what's left over after we restore healthy functioning. So why is this uniquely suited for a CNS above any other nutrition professional or certification? And I believe that's because to get to the point where you have a CNS, you are going to develop an advanced understanding of biochemical pathways and how nutrition affects those biochemical pathways. It's amazing to me still how many patients come in and they want to talk about macros. And I'm like, okay, yes, that's a thing. But did you know that you need every single one of those vitamins and minerals in your diet for biochemical pathways to actually function? And it culturally, we don't necessarily think of nutrition in that way, right? I feel like we all have a deeper understanding of the connection between the organ systems, right? We're not specializing necessarily in the heart or the reproductive system or the brain. We are understanding how all of those systems work together and why a symptom maybe on the skin is actually telling you about what's happening in the gut. We also have an opportunity to have more time. I spend between 60 and 90 minutes with my patients, depending on what type of visit we have. And that provides an opportunity to ask a lot of questions, to dig in and then dig in again and then dig in again and partner with your client or patient to find out what's happening. I feel like we also, most of us were given some advanced training in motivational interviewing and educating our patients or clients. This is a big deal because their partnership with you is critical to the investigation, right? So really having the skills to engage them is an important part of our process if we're investigating an unknown root cause of a symptom. And then curiosity and perseverance. If those don't feel like natural skills for you, this is going to be a hard approach. And not everybody that is a CNS wants to be an investigative nutritionist, right? Not everybody wants the mystery cases. But if you do, bringing that curiosity and perseverance to the table is what allows you to get there. Okay. So what I wanted to do today is go through the steps that I use to make sure that my investigation is extremely thorough. And this gave me a great opportunity to really think about what do I do actually? How do I get to the answers? And the first step is thorough intake forms and records. I typically find myself apologizing when the patient comes in for their first visit for the intake paperwork because it's long. And it is long because for me, it gives me a chance to review before they come in, but also it gets them thinking, why is she even asking these questions? Why is she asking about dental work? Why is she asking about my mother's health when my mother was pregnant with me, right? And they start to connect the dots before they're even sitting in the room with you. So everything I talk about in this presentation, if you want more information, you're welcome to reach out to me at the end if you want to talk about intake forms and what we actually specifically ask, because I won't go through every section of what we're asking. But the intake form with regards to health history should be very, very thorough. Think about everything you could possibly want to know, and then you're going to re-ask it again when you're sitting in that initial consultation or new patient visit. A very comprehensive symptom survey. This is another thing that gets the client thinking about symptoms that we normalize. So I have a saying that I probably overuse here in the clinic, and it is just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal. And I'm sure you've all found that there are things that clients or patients will say like, oh, I just have seasonal allergies, or yeah, I snore, but it's just because I'm 50 and 50-year-olds snore. Like there is a mentality that if you are a certain age, or you are a certain gender, or you are in a certain phase of life, you're a mother, you're a this, you're that, then feeling less than good is normal. So I try to tell people, yes, it's very, very common, but it isn't actually normal from the standpoint of how our human bodies, our mammal bodies are supposed to function, right? So when they fill out a symptom survey and you ask big questions, big scary questions, but also the little questions around how they may function, it starts to get them thinking, oh yeah, this is a symptom. This is not just a normal way to live. And then prior records. We ask our patients to upload any records that they have within a certain time frame. For me, it's typically 18 months. Past that, I don't feel like it's relevant. And when I'm talking about records, I'm talking about things like recent labs, recent testing. I don't need to see the records from when they, broke their femur 10 years ago or something like that. What I'm looking at is, based on what their chief complaints are today, what data do we have that may point one direction or the other, Okay, so an in-depth initial consultation. So after you've reviewed all the paperwork, hopefully the patient's thinking about some things that might be going on that are not normal, then you have this opportunity to have a conversation. So I typically start that with asking them their story. I say, I've reviewed all your paperwork. I understand that there are things going on, these things going on that we need to dig into. Can you just tell me in your own words the story of how you got here today? And oftentimes they'll say, well, 5 years ago, well, maybe 9 years ago, Well, actually, I'm not sure when this started. And they start to track back and say, there was a time that I used to feel good. Sometimes I ask that question, when's the last time that you felt amazing? And they'll think back and go like, never, or when I was 17 or something like that, right? Those are things that help you figure out when were the earliest signs of this complaint starting. So we talk about their chief complaints. We go back through the paperwork about all of their health history, all their symptoms, and then I do a review of symptoms or of systems. So basically I say things like, tell me about your sleep, tell me about your exercise, tell me about your stress, tell me about any musculoskeletal symptoms, tell me about any symptoms with regards to energy, or do you feel like when you sit down at the computer, you can focus? Do you find yourself distracted? Would you say you have brain fog? And so you're going through sort of thinking head to toe, what are the things that maybe, again, they're normalizing in their minds, but for you, it gives you a clue that something is dysfunctional, okay? Now, in a functional medicine training, so this is something that I developed and learned in my graduate program because it was so functionally medicine focused. We focus on a timeline. So we start with their conception or even the parent's health before that. So, you're doing a family history, you can talk about grandparents and siblings and all that stuff, but we're really talking about what was the health of the parents when this human being came into the world. And then going through, the way I do it is going through the person's health history starting at birth and then every 10 years from there. So 0 to 10 years old. Tell me about your health. Did you have ear infections when you were little? Did you colic? Did you have, tell me about what you know about your infancy, your toddler years. What about preschool years? Then going into kindergarten, you see what I mean? And you're walking them through this because it's triggering things for them. Then I normally go back and say, okay, so you felt great as a kid. You had no symptoms, no complaints. Can't think about going to the doctor. You don't remember having antibiotics. And then they start going, oh, no. Yeah, I had like strep throat 6 times. But strep throat, it's like everybody had it. Oh, I had chicken pox and, that sort of stuff. So you're reviewing and reviewing and reviewing until they start popping things up. And maybe they don't. Maybe they were, truly feeling fantastic. The purpose of the timeline, again, for you as an investigator, is to figure out where did things start going awry, or, oh, you had this illness when you were 14, which I know is related to the symptoms you're experiencing right now at 34, at least from a research perspective, at least from biochemical perspective. I wonder if those things are truly connected. A lot of things shift in adolescence. So that's a period of time I spend a lot of time on, especially for women. They will pop up with inflammatory symptoms, histamine-related symptoms, often because of the big spike in estrogen that happens during that period of time. So I probably am almost excessive when it comes to this timeline because I find it so important, but also when we go through it, it's another opportunity for the client to start thinking about the dots that are being connected between how they feel today and how they were feeling, 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, and how it may have cascaded. So, of course, we want to review medications, supplements, family history, nutrition, lifestyle routines. Those are all really important when you're thinking about your intervention down the line. And then at the end, I say, is there anything that we haven't talked about? Is there anything you're concerned about that we haven't talked about now that you've had a chance to really think about it? And that's a nice way to kind of umbrella this whole thing, package it up with a bow and say, okay, I feel like I have as much information as I'm going to get from them at this moment. You'd be amazed at how many people literally text their parents while they're in an appointment with me. Mom, do you remember the illness I had when I was 8? I remember that I was out of school for 3 weeks, that kind of stuff. But that's cool because then you're actually getting more brains in on the history, right? So I encourage that. Okay, you don't have to have a plan in that initial consultation. Sometimes you're going to immediately start thinking, I'm concerned about this thing or that thing, right? But sometimes you're going to want more information from previous providers, okay? So we use record request forms and we will request records from their physicians, acupuncturists, physical therapists, massage therapists, it doesn't matter. Anybody that might have more information about what's been going on with this person. Some providers will request that you have the patient sign something, and some will just take it from you because you're another provider office. So it depends on how you've set your practice up, probably. So we use a records request form. We make sure that if the patient's sharing things with us or the other clinician is sharing things with us, that we have a way for them to do that that's HIPAA compliant. So through our clinic, we use a electronic medical record system. So typically that's not an issue, but just make sure that you've got that set up if you do plan to request records. If you don't have that set up, you can ask the patient to request the records and gather that information as well and get it to you. And that is also fair. You can have them sign something saying that email is not a HIPAA compliant way of sharing information, but they agree that that is acceptable to them. We have patients that happily email us through our general email and not through the EMR. So now this is your chance to look for clues. You're going through previous labs and thinking, is there something here that the other provider didn't catch? Remember, a lot of these people have seen providers that have very limited time. They have 5-minute appointments or 10-minute appointments, right? And so they may have collected a lot of data with labs, or even imaging, but they didn't actually have the time set aside to go through it. So it may be the same data that this patient has had for 2 years, but nobody else saw what you're seeing because you're putting in this extra time. So now you've collected a pretty large amount of data between your intake forms, your initial consultation, and records requests. And now it's your opportunity to think about what additional data you need. So you may be ordering testing at this point in time. Sometimes I make this decision while I'm sitting in an appointment with somebody in their initial consultation, because it's so obvious to me that we need this data. Or if I say, when's the last time you had a comprehensive medical panel? And they say, probably 4 years ago. I say, cool, we know we're doing that. Let's get that set up. Depending on your relationship with different labs, there are national labs that if you need that relationship so you can order these sorts of things, reach out to me and I'll give you the people that I use for this. But because I do work with people all over the country remotely, I use a national lab, so I can use the same lab for everybody no matter what state they're in. You may feel like you need blood testing. Maybe it's medical, food sensitivity, infection panels, micronutrient panels, toxins, etc. Stool testing is something we do regularly. Generally, when people come into the clinic with any type of dysregulated bowel movements, acid reflux, history of things like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's, those sorts of things, we're going to do some level of stool testing and decide on what that stool testing is based on the symptomology. And then sometimes we're using urine testing. My experience is that when I offer the options to the person and I explain to them why, I'm suspicious that this is going on, I need to validate it, I'd like to do these tests, what would you like to do? Then they tend to be pretty excited that somebody's actually taken an interest in figuring out the answer. And most of the people I work with are pretty excited about doing testing if it means we're going to find an answer. To that end, I use discretion. Most people I'm not going to throw $2,000 of testing at. I do have those people, and sometimes when they're really sick, it's what we're doing. But generally, we're going to prioritize it and say, the most likely cause of your symptoms is this, let's test that first. And then the most likely cause of symptoms, if we don't find what we're looking for, secondarily might be this, and give them an opportunity to piece it together unless they're desperate and they feel like I need it all now, find the answer, test it all. And sometimes we do that. So now you've ordered testing, you're going to get your testing back and you're going to review your testing, typically with the patient. Okay. Oops, I forgot my step 5. Sometimes in the middle of this, while we're waiting for testing, we decide to use trackers. Commonly CGM, continuous glucose monitors for our practice. because we'll have a lot of inflammatory issues. We have a lot of people that are struggling with brain fog and issues where we feel like if we can stabilize the glucose, or if glucose is an issue, then we can intervene with that at our follow-up appointment. So it's great when I have a person that I send out for labs. It's going to take 2 to 3, maybe 4 weeks to get those back. In the meantime, they're using a CGM, or in the meantime, they're tracking their sleep or their heart rate variability on their Whoop or a ring. Sometimes it's blood pressure, because when they come back for their follow-up, then we have a pool of data on top of lab results to review. Okay. Sometimes you're going to look at the data you have and think to yourself, this is potentially beyond my scope, potentially beyond my liability that I want to be taking on. And so I always put in all of my follow-ups to people, please share with your primary care provider all the labs I do, because as we know, we can't diagnose. So let's say somebody's glucose comes back, their A1C comes back at 6.8, and you can't say you're diabetic. We're just not licensed to do that, right? But you can say, your findings are consistent with risk of diabetes, and I think we should share this with your primary care provider so they can do some retesting. And in the meantime, we can apply all the things we know about how to reduce your blood sugar, okay? So when you find something that is suspicious in the workups you're doing, make sure that you involve the correct care team. A primary care is always #1 for me, or general practitioner, because they will triage the care to all the specialists if that's needed. Sometimes because you're doing a deep dive and you have this awesome opportunity to do this, you find things that weren't found, and they're hard things. You come up with things that you don't necessarily want to be delivering the news to the patient. You know what you're seeing, but it's really not for you to deliver, because again, you can't diagnose. If you have any inkling that there's something bigger going on, it's the time, even though you're a great investigator, it's the time to send that back to the people that then need to do a further investigation or treat. Typically in that case, so let's say that I get some labs back and I'm realizing, ooh, this is something scary. I'm gonna coordinate this conversation with the primary care. I may call the primary care and say, hey, I want to let you know that I'm sending this patient back to you. This is what I found. And then I typically say to the patient, so I'm going to move into an advocate role for you. I'm going to support whatever's going on. I'm going to advocate for you getting the right care and the right people. And I'm going to make sure that we track you along the way to make sure that you're as supported as you need to be. Okay. So step 7, you listened to them, you had a hypothesis, you tested that hypothesis. At some point you had an intervention. So let's say you found something. Let's say you did have an A1C of 6.8, you send them back to primary care, but you say, in the meantime, we're going to put you on a high fiber, lower carbohydrate diet. We're going to do some other things we know support glucose metabolism, and we're going to retest you as we go along with your CGM on, and then in a blood test in 6 weeks. Okay. Why are you going to do that? Because while you may be able to track on a CGM, or you may have another situation that you're able to track, for you to validate that what you thought was going on was correct, you need to retest. And for you to validate to the client that what you thought was correct, you need to retest. And so typically people are pretty excited about doing this. And so remember that, because when you're in an investigative state, you are in essence being a scientist, right? So you need to have a scientific method approach. So test, intervene, track, retest. Don't be afraid to do that. It doesn't mean you're always retesting in 6 weeks. Oftentimes we find ourselves retesting at about the 3-month mark or the 6-month mark, depending on what we found. On the other hand, a lot of the times we'll see gut issues and we won't retest if they fully resolve, but if symptoms recur, we'll retest, that sort of a thing. Okay. One of the things that is critical about being an investigative nutritionist and really garnering a reputation around that, because I think when you do this type of work, you generally have a referral-based practice. People say, I got better, you have to go see this person. This person figured out what was going on with me when nobody else could. Go see this person. One of the things that is, I would say, a big part of how I work and how my colleague Ashley, who's also a CNS here at BioLounge works, is we spend a lot of time in research. So when you're dealing with people that have interesting presentations and you're not necessarily sure what's going on, and then maybe you have labs or you have other records, or you have, you're putting together all the data, when you're thinking about how your practice is structured, you have to carve out time to be in a state of research, like on PubMed for an hour or 2 hours for this person, trying to put pieces together, maybe looking back at your textbooks, maybe researching in other ways, talking to other providers. And so we build our practice this way, so we have that time dedicated, and we also build our pricing structure this way. Because while I know I'm going to spend time reviewing records before, then I'm going to have a consultation, then I'm going to be thinking about labs, reviewing more records, and I may be researching, I could spend 4 or 5 hours on one patient in one visit in the more extreme situations. So remember that every time you have a case like that, you have this opportunity to sharpen your skills, to build your knowledge base. And this is how we get more efficient, right? We become more efficient at this investigative approach as we learn more, know more, and we connect more dots. Okay. So I thought I'd share with you guys a case study. This, man, oh man, this was one of the original for me, where I thought, holy cow, there's a lot I don't know. This is a little bit mind-blowing. So this is one of my favorite stories. I have a sort of unique relationship with an integrative dentist here in Portland. And he has a practice in which people fly in from all over the country to see him, because he does a lot of what I do, but in the dental health field. He finds things that other people don't find and educates the patient on how it connects with their health. So he sends me a lot of patients that have systemic health issues, and he's resolving the issue in the mouth, and I'm working on how it may have affected the rest of the body. And this relationship began because of this one patient, Beth. So this was now 3.5 or more years ago. This woman came to me. I actually knew her outside of the medical field as a friend of a friend. And she said, hey, I feel great. Everything's going great. But out of the blue, recently, my LDL and total cholesterol popped up, and I don't know why, and I want to figure out if there's a reason. So we did her labs, and in fact, yes, her LDL and total cholesterol were elevated. And then she also came up elevated for Lp(a), which is an independent genetic risk factor for cardiovascular disease. So I was concerned, but I'd been doing her labs for a while. So I'm looking back saying, how did her cholesterol go up 40 points in the last year, 50 points in the last year? A little bizarre. So this is actually truly a pano of her mouth. Okay, so you can see from her dentist, there's a lot going on there. You see implants, and then on the left-hand side where you see those white roots, those are all root canal teeth that had been left in. Excuse me. Okay, so let me share some tests with you, and I'll tell you the timeline of what we found. Okay, so this was September 2019, so I guess that gives me the context. We're almost 4 years into this relationship with the dentist I work with. So when I ran her labs, she came back with a total cholesterol of 221, HDL 83, LDL 123. Okay, so this was an increase for her. I said to her in this visit, there might be something inflammatory going on in your system. has anything changed? Is there anything you can think of that might be telling your liver to produce more cholesterol? She said, no, I feel great. And she left. She called me from the car about 10 minutes later and said, hey, I just thought of something. I was seeing my dentist and he said that I have a bunch of root canals, and I don't totally understand this, but he said that underneath the roots, he can see that there's infections. So I have these teeth coming out. I don't have any symptoms, but I have these teeth coming out because I'm worried about it. Do you think that could be it? And I said, I have no idea. I've never heard of this before. This is all new information for me. And so, whoops, sorry, guys. Okay, so I said, I'm going to call him if that's okay with you and ask him what he is seeing. In the meantime, we had done food sensitivity testing, and I said, why don't you just take these foods out, and I want you to add a bunch of soluble fiber in, and let's see what we can do to lower your cholesterol. Okay. All right. So talk to the dentist. He tells me, oh yeah. So these are called apical lesions. They're actually infections at the base of the root canal because there's dead tissue there, and it causes a chronic inflammatory response of the immune system. And I said, my understanding is that when the liver is triggered to repair tissue, it creates more LDL. I wonder if there's a connection. And he said, hey, do you want to run labs before and after we take these out and see if anything changes? And I said, yeah, I sure do. That sounds really fun. So remember, she had taken food sensitivities out, increased her soluble fiber. So I reran her labs before we knew she was going to go in for this oral procedure. And it was a big oral procedure. You saw there were a lot of teeth that needed to come out. So in October 19, so this is only a month after she started the food sensitivity and fiber thing, we saw a decrease, which I would expect to see. A little less inflammation, a little more binding of cholesterol in the small intestine to pull it out. Okay, so 207 for total cholesterol, LDL had gone down to 117. We're still above the normal range. So she has the procedure, I believe, in the end of November. And I said, let's give your body a little time to heal from this, because it was, like I said, major. They took out, I think, 8 or 9 teeth. She had to have new implants and bridges, and it was quite a thing. So we retested when the dentist told me, okay, the tissue's healed. And her cholesterol was at 175 and her LDL was at 96. My mind was blown. It was like, oh my gosh, I have to know more. Why did this happen? Okay, so here's what I found. Oh, I told you, intervention, fiber, removing food sensitivities, removing root canals. So here's what I learned in the research. And I didn't know this at the time. I had no idea why her cholesterol was going down because we took infection out. But I dug in, and this is what I found. The liver increases the production of LDL when there's an acquired immune response, because we need to repair the cells, and the cells need cholesterol for the membrane. So it's triggering this increase in cholesterol production to repair the tissue. It also requires, so when this infection is happening, the liver is getting the sign it needs more lymphocytes. So I didn't know we needed cholesterol to make lymphocytes, but turns out you do. So when there's a chronic infection or chronic inflammatory response happening, you're likely going to see an increase in LDL and total cholesterol because the body's asking for more. Okay. So we see increased LDL compared to HDL is often a sign of inflammation and infection. So another thing I learned is that the LDL molecule, the protein that carries cholesterol, I think of now as the delivery truck. When I explain it to patients, I say, listen, this is the Amazon delivery truck of cholesterol. Your liver sends it out, it drops off cholesterol packages all over your body. Isn't that cool? And then your body uses it for hormones and tissue and all the things it needs it for. But if you leave too much in circulation, we have a problem. So HDL is your recycling truck. It goes around and picks everything up. My understanding of the liver and cholesterol is still not advanced. I will not claim to have an advanced understanding, but it was Beth's case that caused me to acknowledge my lack of understanding and dive into the research, right? And talk to other providers about it and learn more about what was really happening and why an infection in the mouth was causing what we would consider to be a cardiovascular risk, right? Okay, periapical lesions increase inflammatory cytokines, which leads to a risk of metabolic disorder. So we think of cardiovascular in the metabolic disorder world. Metabolic disorders reduce the ability of tissue to heal. So now it's this vicious cycle. Again, all of this research came from Beth's case. Okay, so before we jump into questions, what I want to say is that experience was an opportunity for me to investigate. That experience was an opportunity for me to intervene with somebody and support their health as an investigative nutritionist. However, that opportunity was also the start of a relationship with another provider that has fed my business. I get referrals from him multiple times a month with people, like I said, coming in from all over the country. He and I get together for coffees to talk about the research. How is this impacting this patient? How is this impacting this patient? It changed my health intake form because I surely wasn't asking about root canals, implants, and wisdom teeth extractions where there are cavitations that are infectious before I met him, okay? And so all of these opportunities to sharpen our skills are also opportunities to build relationships, to deepen our understanding of these other specialties. And then we get to offer more comprehensive care to our patients as a whole. In tandem with that, I got so geeky about dental health that I speak all over the country at dental conferences. I mean, weird, right? Nutritionist that speaks at dental conferences, but I do education around the systemic inflammation that comes from the mouth, the gut microbiome and the oral microbiome. And then it builds this entire additional referral source with dentists all over the country that now send me patients to work with virtually when they can't figure out why something's happening. So you never know, right? You never know what's going to happen, why it's going to happen. But as you continue to sharpen your skills, as you continue to learn more and research more, you'll continue to build these really cool opportunities. So if you want to learn more, if you want to chat with me, we have lots of things going on here at BioLounge. So we do offer a clinical immersion program. So we do a 12-week program that it does offer CNS supervision and continuing education credits. So if you're already a CNS, continuing education, if you're trying to get your hours for CNS, our program offers hours. But it focuses on how you take your education and apply it in clinical practice, specific protocols, specific conditions you're going to see, how we investigate it from start to finish, how we do this job here at BioLounge. We also have a newsletter, which you'll see here called the Clinical Insider. And this is kind of fun because it's a case study every few weeks. So Ashley and I both look at what are cases that are really interesting to us. And then we put together a little PDF of a case study and a little video explaining what we did. So you can sign up for that and then get those case studies every few weeks as we put them out. And then you can email me at learn@bioloungepdx.com, or you can email me at megan@bioloungepdx.com. So I love engaging with other providers and CNSs specifically. So please do not hesitate to reach out just to chat anytime. It's the most fun part of my job. So that is it. I'm so glad you guys were here. I'm going to open it up to questions, and I see there's something in the chat, and we can dive in there.
There's one question from Julia. Julia says, how do you balance the various specialties / scopes of practice when working as part of an integrative clinic? You mentioned you work with a nurse practitioner. I know there are many integrative clinics that have a mix of NDs, MDs, CNSs, RDs. Do patients and clients typically see only one of you, or do you work as a team? Do you all take a similar approach, or do you find you address clients' cases uniquely as a CNS / nutrition specialist?
I love all these questions. These are great questions. You know, the way we work together as a team happened organically as we built a larger practice. So many of our patients see many of our providers. Currently at BioLounge, just to give you an example, my business partner is a nurse practitioner that focuses on longevity, functional medicine, and male and female hormones. He doesn't love the deep dive. He doesn't really want to do the mystery complex illnesses. So he punts those to me. So it's nice to have a relationship with a provider in your clinic that doesn't necessarily want to do all the stuff you're doing. And so you guys can complement each other and use your specific expertise to support the patient together. We also have another clinical nutritionist. We also have a cardiovascular specialist, and we also have a fertility and reproductive health, women's health provider. So the way that we do this together is there may be an entry point to a provider for a patient, and we may find, okay, we're either going to need this other provider's help or that other person's going to be better for you. But we have designed those roles, those scopes of practice, and those specialties uniquely to our team. And I actually think that's probably what happens in every clinic. There are other functional medicine clinics here in Portland where I know the providers, like the MDs and NPs, do a wider scope of functional medicine. And then they really use their CNSs to do the nutrition approach and education. Versus in our case, Ashley and I do a lot of the investigation and treatment much more comprehensively in functional medicine than just the nutrition. So sorry, that's vague and maybe not helpful, but I think it does vary. Oops, I can't hear you.
I was muted, sorry.
Okay.
Asking, investigative nutrition requires a great deal of time. How do you structure your fee schedule to allow for the extra research time? That's a great question.
Yeah, it's a great question. And feel free to go to BioLounge.pdx.com and look at our fees because we post them under pricing. But I will tell you, my expectation is that with initial consultations and lab reviews, I'm going to dedicate significant time. My initial consultation is $325 for 75 minutes. My follow-up lab reviews are $275 for 90 minutes. Why are they less money for more time? Because actually those take me less time outside of the visit. The initial consultation, I account for probably average another hour. When Ashley started with me, she was new out of school. She was interning with me, and then I hired her. She may spend 3, 4, 5 hours outside of an initial consultation because she was new. She was honing those skills, right? I'm more concise with my time now because I've done it for longer. So you have to keep that in mind. You can't price yourself out of the industry, right? You can't charge $1,000 for your initial consultation. But you may know that in the beginning, you're going to be paying yourself less per hour as you learn more. But by the time you get to, if you can charge $325 for an hour and 15 minutes and only spend another 45 minutes after that researching, you're doing pretty good, right? On your hourly rate. So that's how I think about it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. We have another question. Oh, 2 questions. So the first one, you mentioned you offer your services across the country. Have you ran into issues with state regulations regarding the services you offer as a CNS?
No. And that's not to say I couldn't, because, I totally transparently don't know the regulations of every single state. But because of the way I work, I don't think I would run up against that very often. And here's the reason why. Because I offer consulting. I do run labs and do tests and all that fun stuff, but I put in every chart note that this is to be shared with a primary care provider and treated in that way, right? So I'm still really offering nutrition advice. That's what I'm doing. I may be discussing and educating on a lot of other things, but when it comes to my interventions are within my scope generally everywhere. I'm doing nutrition.
Okay. And then the second question was, any issue with using the title functional medicine nutritionist?
Not yet.
I haven't seen with that anywhere either.
It's kind of the Wild West still, I feel like, right? So a lot of this is, I always wonder, are we going to have, some big crackdown regulations around what we're allowed to do? We're not there yet.
And it depends on your state too. So just make sure that, Oregon has different laws than, Maryland. So make sure you're following the laws in your state as to what the title protection is, but that doesn't mean you have to call yourself what the title is telling you that you have to call yourself.
And there are doctors even that I work with here in Portland that do like mast cell activation and Lyme and, you know, complex stuff, mold and all that. They're licensed in Oregon and they work with patients all over the country because they're very clear that they're consulting and they don't treat, and they give the patient information that they can take to their local doctor for treatment, but they're consulting. So legally make sure you're framing things properly, right? And that your chart notes are your chart notes. It doesn't matter what you say, it matters what you write in a legal document. So make sure that you're thorough in that.
And to keep in mind too, that usually the laws around titles are preventing you from calling yourself a dietitian or an RD. It's not preventing you from using a different title. It's from using that licensed title. So Tammy had put a note about that in Oregon, the title law regulation is preventing you from using the title RD if you're not an RD, but there's no practice there. So make sure you check your state though. Okay, Michaela asks, how long after the initial consultation do you generally start to implement interventions?
Great question, and it's a range. Sometimes I have initial interventions before they leave in the initial consultation. So an example of that would be somebody that has a lot going on with their gut, and I know we have to do some work around it, but they have chronic constipation, and I know I can fix that in a day. I send them out the door. I say, you're going to go home with soluble fiber and magnesium citrate and electrolytes. Goodbye. You're going to be pooping, right? Like there's a whole nother talk I'm going to do for you guys at some point this year about the big win. People don't know what you do. Like, we're not MDs, we're not chiropractors. People don't know what we do. So if you have a simple solution to something that they're suffering with right now, while you're doing your investigation, give it to them. Solve any little problem you can solve at the beginning with your knowledge and education. So by the time they come back to you, they're like, whoa, I feel great. Or holy cow, who knew I could poop, right? Like, those are the sorts of things we love to do because of course we want them to feel better, but we also want to gain their trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Christine asked, do you offer packages?
Oh, I've tried lots of times, but no. And the reason the answer is no is because every person is so different that I don't know how long I want to see them. And I think of myself at like, the less I can see them, the better, in the fact that if I can solve it fast and get them feeling better, that's my plan. So when I was offering packages and trying to do that earlier in my career, I'd be like, oh no, I sold you 6 sessions, but I only needed to see you for 4. I didn't want to be in those positions. You know what I mean? So I have good follow-up in my medical record system that tells me it's been 3 months, check in with this person. It tags me to do that because I want to make sure that I stay in connection with them and continue to give them care. And that's good for my business model too. But I don't want to commit them to something they may not need.
Yeah, okay. Tammy asked if you could provide the links to the research articles that you used in your presentation.
I will send those to you guys after for sure.
Yeah,
yes.
If you want to send them to me, I can send them out to everyone with the recording.
Yeah, I actually pulled those slides from my oral health presentation that I do. So I didn't have the citations here, but I will grab them for you and send them to you. I'm happy to do that.
Great. Thank you. Julia asked, this might be a long answer, but at a high level, what does a week in your practice or life look like? New versus old clients, client-facing time versus research time, admin, other business endeavors.
Yes, that's a great question. So when I transitioned to being an owner at this clinic, part of my role is growth and marketing. And so I reduced my patient days to 2 days a week. So this is what my week looks like. Monday, I do staff meetings individually with all of my employees for half the day. Then I write my newsletter that goes out early Tuesday mornings every single week. Tuesdays, I see patients virtually from home, so my dogs can be outside all day long from 8 until 5. I do virtual patients, which that's often my people that are around the country. Then on Wednesdays, I see patients face-to-face in the clinic. Thursdays, I spend the first 4 hours doing fluoroscopy work and the second half of the day doing more marketing for BioLounge. And Fridays, I wrap up all my admin, all my patient communication if I need to be doing that, and make sure that everything is done efficiently. Because the other thing that is important to remember when you're in a cash-based practice is that your customer service is how you stay in business. So getting back to people, making sure their questions are answered through the EMR, making sure you're getting back to potential new patients. If you don't do that in about 24 hours, you're going to lose it, and then your business starts to slide. So the customer service part of what we do is really critical. So that's and then I normally work on Saturdays and Sundays from 5 to 7 in the morning before my whole family gets up, because there's other, there's stuff, but that's also because I'm running, I'm trying to run the business part of it while also doing the patient care.
Thank you. Christine asks, what EHR do you use?
We use Charm. But that, again, because we're a medical clinic, so we need the functionality of the medical clinic. I know a lot of the CNSs and people that are in our clinical immersion program don't need that robust of a program, and so they're using other practice software.
Yeah. Awesome. Hannah said, I love this. It's so comforting to hear an actionable outline for practice. Tammy says she also lives in the area. Oh, in the Portland area, wondering if it'd be possible to meet in person. You've got your
email me.
Reach out, Tammy.
Yep. Here.
Awesome. Okay, so I think that's it. I put the I put the survey link in the chat, and also the link to the webinar page. So Megan and Ashley are going to be doing a couple more webinars this year as part of their series. So the next one is in September, discussing how to review medical labs with nutrition in mind. And then in October, discussing how to collaborate with a patient's other providers and gain referrals. And then the last one, why do you need a big win before your follow-up appointment, which is what you were talking about earlier. So that'll be a good one. So I will send out the recording to everyone that registers. So even if you can't make it, please register. That way we can send you out the materials and the recording once we have it. And actually we might have another question. Nope, that's it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Megan. This was great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I had a great time and can't wait to come back.
Great, thank you. And if anybody needs Megan's information after we get off, if you didn't get it written down, let me know. All right, thanks so much. Have a good day.
Bye, thanks.